Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Legend Fiction Show. I'm your host, Dominic, founder of Legend Fiction. And today we're joined by somebody I bumped into on Instagram who's creating an incredibly cool audio project. Her name is Callie Sioux. Welcome to the show, Callie.
Hey, thank you very much, Dominic. And yes, I also came across Legend Fiction on Instagram. About the same time, we noticed each other like, wait, what are you doing? Wait, what are you doing? So I'm really excited to be on the show. It's an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I love Instagram for that purpose. Almost
Mhm.
everybody I've interviewed on this show has just been like, whoa, what is this cool new account? And so, yeah, we grow that way. Okay, can you share with us the name of your project and why it's so cool? It's an audio drama that's landing in August. And I think
Mhm.
you and your sister have been spearheading this whole thing. So tell us about it.
So it's called 1232, as in the year. 1232 is an audio epic. It's a time travel medieval fantasy adventure for all ages.
Sweet.
I grew up listening to Adventures in Odyssey and The Shadow and Orson Welles and Hank the Cowdog and lots of audiobooks and radio theater, audio dramas. And that's always been a huge passion when I was young. I wanted to be a voice for the Odyssey. And then my sister and I were writing the story called 1232. And everything just it was a God thing, straight up. Everything just lined up for us to turn it into an audio epic. So what's an audio epic? It's a fully narrated, like an audiobook, so you never lose your place. You got a narrator to ground you. Full dramatization, like full voice cast, all the characters. Sound design, which is all the sound effects that we put in to really immerse you in the world. And then an original score that my husband and I are writing. And so it's got its own soundtrack, everything. There's over 60 episodes. And each episode is 20 to 30 minutes. There's over 40.
Incredible.
Yeah, there's over 40 distinct voice actors. So that's why we call it an audio epic,
No
not just
kidding.
an audio drama. There's nothing like this that's been done to date that's going to be put out in an episodic way on all streaming platforms for free starting in August.
So tell us about the story. Why 1232? And hey, time travel, you won me. So
Right,
where's
okay,
it going?
good. Time travel, excellent. So we've got time travel, we've got Arthurian legend, we have medieval
Sweet.
history, we have pagans versus Catholicism, actually, and it's
Really?
Christianity, early Christian church within the medieval world, and we go back to medieval Wales. So the story itself is about brother and sister Rona and Flint Thatcher, who are no longer communicating. They're coming from a broken family, a broken home. There's been death in the family. There's been a lot of miscommunication. Their father has gone missing, and they're both living pretty desperate, despondent lives. They're not in a good place when we come across them in the story. Then, in order to find their father, they come together. They get whisked back in time to medieval Wales in the year 1232, where they help a penniless leader, a warrior priest, to defeat a evil enchantress called Zoriel that's taken over the kingdom of Brecon in Wales.
Okay.
So, yeah,
What's the intended? Is it like family listening? Is it teens, kids?
Oh, it's absolutely all ages.
Okay.
So it's family friendly. We deal with a lot of difficult topics. The goal with it is that no matter what age you're listening, if you're a young kid, 8, 9, 10 years old, you're just going to have fun with the adventure, hopefully learn some valuable lessons along the way, but enjoy a lot of the humor and comedy. If you're a teenager, hopefully this is really going to speak to you where you are in your life and some of the angst and struggles that you're going through. If you're in your 20s and you're angry at the American religion of Christianity and church, you're going to be able to get some of that out and then hopefully receive some truth that's always been there that maybe you might have missed. And then if you're an adult, hopefully it's going to do the same thing for you. Just speak to your heart. And action adventure, I characterize it as, something very close to A Knight's Tale meets the BBC's version of Merlin, that show that came out in the early O's.
Yep, I love that show.
It's almost nostalgic now because it has a very early 2000s feel. Like if I were to compare it to a lot of different TV shows and films and books that came out.
Okay, that's really curious and specific. What makes an early 2000s feel?
Well, I didn't think that existed until I realized how old I was, and then all of a sudden, I was like, oh, I guess the early 2000s does have a feel where we were coming out with a lot of content, music, books, films specifically, and
Mhm.
TV shows that were family friendly, all ages. They might have dealt with some tough topics. There was some violence,
Mm.
maybe a cuss word or two, but there wasn't a lot of sexual stuff. And we had a wonderful
Mhm.
time frame there where we were getting a lot of fantasy
Yeah.
shows. And I
Yeah.
felt like I could sit down and watch or even listen to a fantasy show, film, whatever, with my family, and nobody had to get embarrassed. Nobody was like, oh, and everyone could enjoy it. And I miss that type of community. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of families are missing that kind of community with their kids. You know, people these days, podcasts are very popular. People are
Mhm.
listening to adult conversations that, you know, if you're being a responsible parent, you may not necessarily want your kids to hear that, but you want something everyone can listen to that
Right.
has nothing to do with like YouTube kids cheesy cartoons or something. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't have children, but my sister does. And so we test everything through her kiddos to see how
Oh,
they
how
respond.
fun. Okay, so tell us little bit more about your background and your story, because I'd love to understand why this story resonates with you. Like, why did you write it?
Right. Well, buckle up.
Here we go.
Yeah, seriously. I'm even gonna take a drink. Ah. So I grew up on a ranch in New Mexico. Well, you really kind of a couple of ranches across New Mexico and West Texas. I know I don't look like it right now, but my family background has been in agriculture, raising beef cattle for 4 or 5 generations within the United States,
Wow.
and then further back in Scotland. We've just always been rural people, and that's the environment I grew up in.
Mhm.
My sister and I were both homeschooled, and by my mom, who my family is a little bit of an exception to the rule when maybe you are characterizing rural agricultural people, ranchers. They were very well traveled. My mom lived in
Mhm.
Kenya as a child. My grandfather was like an international ranch consultant and traveled all over. So I grew up with a lot of literature, a lot of different cultures in the family sphere.
Mhm.
So from a young age, I knew about Europe and I loved European history. I loved our Scottish and Native American and Irish heritage that all mixed here in the States.
Mhm.
And I just fell in love with Scotland at a very early age. And so
Mhm.
I kind of became what you could call an Anglophile. Like anything British, I got involved in. And I was a dreamer and a writer, my sister both. I wanted to be a screenwriter, she wanted to be a novelist. So when I was about, I know this is a long intro into who I am and why I write,
No, keep going. Fire away.
but my I had this reoccurring dream. I wrote film scripts, made little movies with my friends, and I
Mhm.
had this reoccurring dream about a brother and a sister who went back in time and fought with this evil enchantress and had this real crazy faith encounter experience through the lenses of a medieval world that really
Mhm.
changed how they looked at things. And so I wrote a script, a full 90-page, like feature length film script.
Wow.
And I
Did
went
you go to school for like screenwriting, or you taught yourself?
taught
YouTube
myself.
University?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. I didn't have Wi-Fi, so or internet.
Oh,
It would
okay.
dial up back then, so YouTube was a
Okay.
no. But I had lots of books and lots of National Geographics. My uncle went to film school, so I got his old curriculum. It was self-taught and probably not that good. But anyways, so I wrote this film script, and then I went to my parents and I said, I want to make this movie. And they're like, Callie, this is a movie set, in medieval times. Like, this is New Mexico.
You were
We're
like
not even.
what, 15? What,
I
13?
was I was 17 at this point. Yeah,
Okay.
so right at the end of high school. And they're like, Callie, this is impossible. And so then what we decided to do was cut it down into like a trailer or short film. So cut the
Mhm.
script down to 3 or 4 pages and then shoot that. And what I had done was, with this reoccurring story, I knew too much about Scotland, because I'd been there and traveled, and Ireland, like as far as the folklore and the history, that I didn't want to place my story in those countries because I felt like it would conflict with what I knew. And I wanted things to happen my way in constructing this story. And so I didn't do any research. I was just like, well, nobody knows anything about Wales. Where, do people even know that's another country? And I found a map of Wales in National Geographic.
Mhm.
And I picked the one town I could pronounce, and it was called Brecon. I didn't know anything else about the area. Like I said, I didn't have internet. I didn't research it, nothing.
Mhm.
Like, I kind of didn't care at that point. I just wanted
Right.
somewhere to ground my story. So
Mhm.
I wanted to have a medieval history feel. So then we made the trailer. it was incredible. The Lord provided rain. We had over 60 volunteers. Our local church, we put everybody
Sheesh.
together, and
Wow.
we made this film and got to take it to some homeschool conventions and encourage
Is the
other
trailer online?
No,
Not anymore? Okay.
no, no. It might be coming soon as we're releasing the show. With some fun,
Okay, cool.
behind the scenes. But so when we took it to some homeschool conventions, we were encouraging other homeschoolers and their parents to
Mhm.
think of film as a way to really be a part of their lives and to express their art. And
Mhm.
my sister and I had a conversation, and she said, "Man, Callie, there seems like there's more to the story than what's in the script. Like, why is this happening? Why is that happening? Blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Actually, there is." And she's like, "We should turn it into a novel." And so I was like, "Great, let's do it." So we started writing the novel. So as you can tell, this was like 14 or 15 years ago at this point. And then we were just writing it off of our own inspiration and brainstorming. We had our good guys hiding in a cave, and our castle needed to be made of wood and not stone all the way because we had to burn it down in the story, and lots of things happened. And that were very specific that we wrote in. In 2010, we had the opportunity to actually go to Wales, and we're like, "Hey, let's go check out Brecon." And we did. And lo and behold, this is so weird, but this is the way the Lord works. Every landscape, like landmark that we put in the story, we saw no photos of Brecon whatsoever. All existed. Brecon had a cave system that the rebels used to hide out when there was a big upheaval in Brecon in the early 1200s. The castle was indeed made partially of wood, partially of stone. The river ran a very specific way through the town. Like, I kid you not,
That's hilarious.
details.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. Details about the story were true. And we just felt like that was the Lord's hand on it. We were just like, whoa, what is this? So we continued writing the story, did more research. And then she went off and had a family and stayed out on the ranch. I married a rock and roller, became a musician, and traveled the US and Europe for the better part of a decade playing music. And then 2020 happened, and I couldn't be on the road touring anymore. So I was able to finally sit down, my sister and I, and finish 1232 as a complete story, as the novel. Then started sending out query letters, got some interesting and good response back. But I was looking at kind of the world of, book publishing versus what's really been taking off and trending is podcasts and audiobooks. And then we sat down, we're like, maybe we could make it an audiobook. We have a studio. My experience in the music industry lent to the audio engineering part, as did my husband's. And next thing you know, I was like, oh, it'd be so cool if so-and-so could actually do the narration. And like, oh yeah, she's a voice actor. Oh, she's going to be great at playing Rona, the main character. And then like, what if we know other people that are voice actors? Next thing you know, I got a list on the table of voice actors and editors and sound designers and musicians that could be a part of this project. So I started asking. I said, hey, do you want to do this? And that's when the audio epic was born. And that was last year, really. January of 2022, and we started production in April, ran a very successful Kickstarter in August of last year, and then here we are a year later about to release season 1.
Season 1. So there's, have you created the other seasons, or they are planned for development?
They're planned in the development. So the first book, 1232, is divided into 2 seasons for the show. So season 1 is 30 episodes, season 2 is 30 episodes. So those are near completion. And then there could potentially, hopefully, if everyone enjoys it and things continue to be fascinating with being on this journey of writing the story, then we'll continue with the season 3 and 4.
That's incredible. So are you're handling all the logistics and all of that for, okay, so how does that work then for people to record different things? Do you do, what is it called? Auditions, and then just have people record their own audio files and email it to you? Or do they come in and you got a little studio? And what is that process like for you?
It's an interesting one. We did a lot of preparation, basically pre-production. So I had been involved in several indie films, music videos, different things like that, and was familiar with the filmmaking process to an extent. And so that's how I decided to kind of chop this up and work in that way. So yes, we did auditions, and really we asked the Lord. We said, Lord, who is to play this character? Because when we did the trailer those years ago for the film, the Lord brought people, and we kind of cast people in the church according to their natural gifts. So the woman who was always doing the bulletin, the schedule and everything, who was very pensive about, spelling and grammar and getting dates on time, we made her a script supervisor because we're like, oh, she's going to stick to it. So we prayed a lot about who is going to be these main characters. Like, who does God want in this story? And they're Christian, non-Christian, and all across the spectrum of religiosity. I don't know. And the Lord just put names on our hearts. So reached out to him and asked him to audition. I only had one no. Everyone else said yes, which was pretty awesome. And then people who already were professionals in the industry had their own studios, so they were able to record remotely, and I could trust them because they met the specs that we need. Because when you're doing an audiobook or an audio drama, there's plenty of that out there right now, and especially in podcast format. But the quality of those recordings have got to be stellar. We wanted a really immersive feel. We wanted it to just be the absolute best, focus on the families, radio theater being the bar, and trying to vault over that if we could, or at least hit the darn thing.
I love the ambition.
Yeah, exactly. That's all it is, really, I guess. But so we just worked with the professionals on their studios. Then anyone who is an amateur, including myself, when it comes to doing voiceover work like this, and anybody who just wanted to give it a go. I knew a lot of people were like, oh, I've always wanted to do audiobooks and voice acting. So I was like, come on. So we had a studio that was kind of donated to the project, actually. And it was an acoustic music studio. So it was very dead, as we would say, like sound wise. There wasn't a lot of reflections and things. And it worked out really well because you want to be able to capture the richness. We already had the microphones and the DAW, or the sound editing workstation that we could use, and Logic Pro. And so there were some technical things that everybody had to meet so that audio would all come together the same. And then it's just a matter of, doing the takes. I would direct people. We'd have a Zoom call, and I'd say, hey, give me a couple, like 3 different takes of these lines, talk about the character, send over descriptions, things like that, little details that are not in the book that they can pull and draw from. And then it's a matter of putting all of that together. And there's a lot of editing involved. It's about, each episode's 20 to 30 minutes. So that's usually around 16 to 20 hours of editing time.
Oh, that's incredible. And are you the person doing that? You're mixing it?
Yeah, we're mixing it up because it's really important to have 1, multiple ears, and 2, people that are really professional. So I do a lot of the audio engineering, the recording process, but then I also do the rough cuts, kind of a first pass, to where I'm selecting the takes that I like, putting it in with the narration, and then, getting the timing right of the lines, things like that, because that's kind of my part as being the director and writer. Then I send it off to one of our incredible team members, this wonderful sound designer that I found through Upwork.com. Actually, I put out a what is it called? A thing?
Job request.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I don't know. I lose certain words in my head, and so found this incredible person that just loved the sound of the project, was game to take on this huge chunk.
Wow.
Worked with him, and then it comes to a final pass where my husband will do, Jet is his name, he'll do some final editing fixes, and then he and I compose the music, and then we put that music to the episode. Then it goes to a final editing process of mastering, which gets it ready for, being on Audible or all that stuff. So it's quite the process.
No kidding.
Each step. So that's why it takes so many hours to do,
So I got three questions now for one would be, I'd like to talk about the Kickstarter. Two, I want to ask you how you're marketing this thing, and then let's start with the more writer-based one, which is after having gone through all of this for really growing the last decade and then the last 2 years, really being intensive with this story.
Mhm.
What are some things that you've learned about storytelling through this process and then this medium?
Oh,
Anything feel obvious?
wonderful things. I think that what was essential for my sister and I to really drive home some of the core spiritual themes in the story was to live life and to be asked a lot of tough questions, to have some really complicated life scenarios, because all of a sudden now we could really pull out what our characters were going through. So, for example, Rona is someone who doesn't believe in God at all, kind of agnostic, doesn't really care, but she makes a lot of poor life decisions, gets her in the wrong kinds of crowds of people, but a very real and tangible person. I know this person, because I've been around them so much. And I'm not knocking authors or writers that, that don't get to travel or do what I've done in life in the public sphere. That's not a requirement by any means to be a good writer. Absolutely not. However, those kinds of life experiences added so much more depth and texture, especially to the dialogue that we wrote, instead of feeling very campy or the dialogue not flowing very well because we had a mission in mind. Instead, we really felt like the characters could speak to us in their own voice, telling us what they were going through. And then Flint was somebody who held on to his Christian faith, but in a very fundamental way, kind of confused about, do we judge others? Do we not? Am I morally superior to other people? And so we were able to play with that. So I think that was the biggest thing, was those life experiences when we revisited the sculpting those characters. And then my sister Cheyenne is really the more like literary one that can just paint the most incredible landscapes and just beautiful prose. And then I'm the one that's just kind of like action, action, and dialogue, action, action, and dialogue, So the fight scenes were very fun for me. And then her setting the scene with the landscape. And we've learned tons. I mean, technical stuff too. Just going through so many different drafts and reiterations. A lot of things changed from, it doesn't look anything really like the script that I wrote. I mean, some of the basic plot points are still there, but it really changed and morphed. And then I think I've learned the most going through the pitching process. Pitching the book, writing the query letters, writing the blurbs, working super hard on a synopsis to get it tight and concise, and then lots of editing to really make sure that each thing drives home. We've had beta readers and editors with the novel. So when it came to transferring it to an audio epic, I left it. I didn't change it into a script form. I just told my voice actors, like, if they're one of the main characters, you've got lines in pretty much every chapter. So enjoy reading the book, But with leaving it in book form, I feel like it has offered a lot of great insight into playing a character, for all the voice actors that have been involved. And then the style that we write together, I would say that our writing styles are quite different apart. She does other writing for blogs, short stories, things like that. I do other writing for short stories and music, interviews, journalist kind of stuff, journalism kind of things. And I'd say that our two writing styles are quite different as far as voicing and how we prefer to do prose. But then when it comes together, it's a whole new animal in and of its own. And working with each other on that has been really interesting. We'd get mad at each other and then, pray about it, I guess, wake up the next morning and be like, okay, you were right, or whatever, giving a lot of ground. But gosh,
fantastic. Just total sidebar. So now I'm curious. You had mentioned Merlin as a favorite show earlier. If you were to pick 3 shows that you're watching these days that you're really enjoying or have recently seen, what would you say?
None right now, to be honest.
Too busy.
I haven't been watching that much. And then honestly, I've been pretty disappointed. I don't want to be too polarizing here, but I thought Rings of Power was bleh. I thought Wheel of Time was bleh. I thought I didn't wanted to watch The Witcher, but I don't want to watch all the stuff involved. I don't have time for all those things, all that sexual stuff to be in my head. That to me, that's not fantasy. So I guess the shows Stranger Things is probably the show that I've enjoyed the most, especially the first and last seasons. And then I'm one of those terrible people that I go back and I revisit shows or I revisit old classic books that I love. I struggle finding books. Well, outside of the obvious, of course, Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and stuff, I'd have to say that I'm a huge Sir Arthur Conan Doyle fan. I've pretty much read everything he's written. So I'll go back to The Lost World. I love that book. Or I'll read a Sherlock Holmes. I'm also an Edgar Allan Poe fan. So I'll revisit some Poe stuff. And then fantasy wise, lots of old fairy tales like Hans Christian Andersen. I go back to the old stuff. George MacDonald. So
nice. Tell us about the Kickstarter. How was that experience? Any tips that you'd recommend to other people who want to launch their own projects?
Definitely. I have the answer. I have the clue. I have the one thing. No, I'm serious. Not me as a person, but the resource that was handed down to me that I 100% believe in. So the Kickstarter was a tough sell because I had cowboy family, grew up ranching and everything. You work hard for everything you got. You don't ever ask anybody for money, period. And so when talking about the Kickstarter with my family and different people like that, in my circles back home, there was a lot of confusion. And they're like, wait, you want people to donate and they get what? And so that conversation, even in Christian circles, can be kind of difficult to have if you're an author or creative and you really need some financial help. People can have a hard time understanding the idea of Kickstarter. At least in my experience, they did. And so how I would explain it is, hey, you're paying it forward. You're going to get the show. You're going to get the product. You're just giving me the money now so I can make it. And then you get everything in return, plus all the tiers and perks. And then I just knew that with all the backstory stuff that we had for 1232 and that this was a crazy project that isn't really out there right now, especially for an independent creative, that it would make a good splash. And then when it comes to Kickstarter, you really look at who's in your circle. It's all about relationships. It's all about those direct asks. My Kickstarter did not go viral or some, fantasy page, pick it up and advertise it. Nope, it was direct asks. So I was given a wonderful resource because I'd helped some other musician friends of mine with their Kickstarters. And Robin Cage, I have to give her all the credit. She's not only a voice actress in the show, but she's the one who really encouraged me to do a Kickstarter. She gave me a book called Crowdfunding for the 99%. Crowdfunding for the other 99%. And you're going to want to write that down because that book is gold. It's been around for a while. I think he has an updated version, but it is the #1 thing. So I followed that book. At first, I didn't follow it to the T, and my campaign kind of fell apart, and I wasn't ready to launch. Then I went back and I said, okay, I'm going to do every single step exactly like it says in this book, and it worked. And lots of people have been able to use it as a resource. And so I was initially asking for $11,000 to do season 1. And that was after I'd already put plenty of my own money into it. And everybody was coming at indie rates, and we were doing a huge majority of the work ourselves. So that was what I was asking for. And within the first 48 hours, we got that 11,000, and I was shocked. Incredible. It was a God thing, 100%. And that has its own story that I won't get into, but has its own thing. And then, so for the rest of the month, we reached 22,000. And that's where our project came out. And my advice for people, which, coming from a total stranger, it'll probably ruffle some feathers, but if you just need to raise a couple $1,000s, please don't use Kickstarter. Go get a job, go use GoFundMe, use Indiegogo, because I think Kickstarter is such a valuable tool and platform. And it's there for when you're trying to show people that you're going to be asking for money, that like you physically cannot get to that amount and you like actually do really need help. In the United States, I don't know if it's like this up in Canada, but in the United States, people want to be a part of something very successful. They're not really willing to do things that you know, that they're like, oh, well, this is just cool, so I'm just going to donate to it. It's more like, oh, is this really working? Is this successful? Somebody have a shot? And when you're asking for just a little bit bigger budget than the couple of thousand that you need to just scrape by and get it done, people then can see that like, wow, they have got a dream. They are ambitious. They've got a goal, and it ups the stakes for the people that are donating, not just for your little heart that's going pitter patter and being like, what if I don't make the money? You know, I did not expect to get that 11,000 in that short amount of time. I thought it was going to take 30 days to do it, you know.
And it mostly all came out of friends and family and people you knew.
And a stranger, complete stranger. You know, it is absolutely about the relationships that you make, because those are the people you're going to ask. But then, you know, people will talk about it, and so hears about it, and they feel that's what happened to me. Is somebody heard about it from a friend, from a family member, and this person was like, this is exactly what I want to see happen in the world in entertainment today. And they donated a very large amount. So
this is what I love about today and about this decade, and how tools like this can allow young people like us to just be like, I want to do it, so I will. And you don't have to wait. You can start, which is incredible. It's what you did. So you've been building a mailing list. You've been building a fan base, I imagine, around this. What's your marketing plan now that it's launching? How are you tackling spreading the word?
You know, everything that I can. Lots of the marketing that I've been doing up to date, because once August hits, some things are going to shift, because I'm actually going to have my product out. It's going to be a little bit easier. So I haven't been focusing on social media too much. That's all been just kind of launching within this last month. What I have been doing is a lot of in-person things. I've been going to like Renaissance festivals, because that's exactly my target audience. Those are people that are going to love everything about the story. Set up a booth, have a medieval listening booth where people can hear samples, and that's
that's funny. Hilarious. What a good idea.
Yeah, and gaining newsletter followers, and then I sell some merchandise along the side of it that includes not necessarily strictly about the story, but anything that kind of goes along with the aesthetic of, you know, medieval history, fantasy stuff. And so that's what I've been doing mostly. My marketing plan is everything. I mean, I'm a part of, you know, doing interviews like this. Thank you very much for helping get it out to other audiences. Lots of different podcasts. There'll be some ad money spent. When I did my Kickstarter, I made sure that I had my marketing budget included in that Kickstarter. And it was a good amount, because that's really the majority of your money should be spent on marketing and advertising, in my opinion. You know, so I made sure that I had that. So there'll be some online ads that I can do through the different streaming services, a little bit of Facebook and Instagram, and then continuing to go to live events. And then also, I'm actually in the talks right now, very serious talks, which is amazing, of a major distribution deal with a pretty big player in the Christian book world. So
that's exciting. So you are publishing the book as well?
No, these folks they do books, audio books, and are just now starting to do podcasts and audio dramas. So they saw my project and are like, oh, this is something we're trying to get into.
That's brilliant. Good for you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Actually, I do want to come back and ask, is the book published? Is it available anywhere? Do you ever plan to release it?
I do. We do plan to release it. We would love for it to be in book form. That's, you know, it was kind of much of its original intention. But we really saw that we would need a lot of, this is going to sound backwards, but we were looking at self-publishing or publishing with, you know, smaller traditional publishing houses, and didn't really like the deals. And it seemed like a lot of effort and work with very little return. So I decided to turn it into an audio epic, which,
Okay.
yeah, that doesn't make any sense. But it it kept me creatively engaged,
Sure.
and it also created a market disruptor,
Mm-hmm.
which then helps me leverage myself to a point where it's like, hey, it's got, Lord willing, it's got this many thousands of downloads. Of course you want to publish it. It's no risk to you. We've already got the fan base, because I was told over and over again that publishing houses were like, well, we don't have an audience to just plug this into. You have to build the audience. And so much today, that's what artists have to do. And it sucks, and it's wrong, and it's imbalanced, and it's not right. But we have to wear all the hats, and we have to do all the work. So however you can use that system and find your own way of a market disruptor, do it.
So last couple of questions as we wrap up here. What's next for you? I mean, I know you're still working on like season 2, but are you thinking beyond that, or what all of this is, where it might be taking you or where it's leading you?
Yes. I mean, I've fallen in love with this process of production and show. It definitely speaks to kind of my filmmaker heart and passion, and being able to do it in this way where it's very remote and everyone can work together. I love collaborating with other artists. That's like my favorite thing. So I'm going to continue with this style of production. But what I'm going to tackle next is some well-known classics to do in this style of audio drama. So like, I love Solomon Kane by Robert E. Howard. We have the train coming. And I love Louis L'Amour. So we're going to be working on doing some other stories that are already established, like some classics in this style. And then I'm still continuing to write. I have a couple of novellas set to that I will self-publish next year. And then I've got some short stories and some anthologies and things like that. So I continue the writing process. This hasn't really changed that. But I really, my goal is just to continue this kind of production level and quality. And, because right now there's not very many independent people that are able to do this. And it's, like Warner Brothers and things like that have come out with a few audio dramas that are almost to this scale. And so I'd like to kind of plunge ahead in this new frontier.
I think it sounds brilliant. I've chatted with another group. They're as young as us. They're called the Merry Beggars, and they ended up getting picked up, and they're producing radio dramas. Is what the way to put it. It's just so fun to see this now happening, because a lot of the tech has become so much easier, and it allows us to be creative in different ways. Where can people find you online if they want to check out what you're doing, join your mailing list, get the updates for when 1232 is coming out?
Right. So Instagram, 1232 Audio Epic, Facebook, 1232, and then my YouTube and my Twitter are under my name, Callie Sioux, Siaux spelled, and then also audio-epic.com. The website's under some construction at this moment, but hopefully by the time this is out, it'll be live. So the audioepic.com is where you'll be able to sign up. The show comes out in August, and hopefully on all streaming platforms, but it might just kind of be on, depending on how this distribution deal goes down. There'll be a couple of different things happening, but you will be able to listen to it and share it publicly in August on most platforms.
Sweet. Key thing is going to be follow the links in the descriptions, folks, and follow Callie and 1232. This was so much fun chatting with you. Thanks for coming on. I've got a final question for you. I'll ask you in just a second. For those who haven't yet heard of Legend Fiction, it's a creative online writing community, and we are producing, well, we've got a couple of different shows, but this show in particular, the Legend Fiction show, it's a community for Catholic and Orthodox fantasy and sci-fi fiction writers primarily, but we've got pretty much everybody in there, primarily to create a space where we can give and get feedback, share our works in progress, triple our writing output because we're all having so much fun. As of this recording, we're counting down towards our second annual free online convention called Legend Haven. So come and check us out at legendfiction.com, and you can start a 30-day free trial. After that, it's only $5 a month, and you can cancel anytime. We're here to help create this new frontier of fun. It's not always family friendly because not everybody's writing for families, but if you are, it's a space where you can share what you're doing and keep yourself inspired and get that stuff written. And that's really what creatives need to do. Surround yourself with other creative people. If you had 30 seconds to share a word of encouragement to other creative fiction writing people or audio producers, storytellers, basically, what would you want to leave with them?
Stay courageous. Keep going with that courage that you have. Never drop your sword of the spirit or the sword of creativity, whatever you got. Never drop that sword. Keep going. I think in today's world, we need hope. I love hope. Hope is my favorite thing that I will always include in all of my stories. So stay courageous, never drop that sword, and please don't lose any hope.